All right. Good morning, and thank you all for being with us today. I'm Chris Moore, president of the Software and Information Industry Association. At the outset, I'd like to recognize and express our gratitude for the participation and commitment, not only of our member companies, but also of our staff, specifically Danny Bounds, Michelle Garvis, Pam Golden, Sarah Cluck, and Paul Lekes, who worked really hard both to develop the principles we're unveiling today and today's event. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank Joel Burke of Senator Rounds' staff for all of his help to make this event a reality. SIIA is the leading trade association for those in the business of information. We represent more than 380 technology, data, and media companies around the world. Our mission is to ensure a healthy ecosystem for the creation, dissemination, and productive use of information. A number of our member companies partner with schools, districts, states, institutions of higher education, and workforce development programs around the world and in the United States to provide educational technology tools for students, educators, and families. Artificial intelligence is one of the most transformative technologies to affect the information ecosystem in our lifetimes. Almost every area of endeavor has begun to explore the use of it, and our members are enthusiastic about its potential and cognizant of its risks. We are of the firm view that AI must be deployed responsibly according to the risks presented by particular use cases. Industry has an affirmative responsibility to develop and publicize principles around which AI can be used. Today, we're proud to announce the principles around which our members have coalesced involving the development and deployment of AI in educational technology. That term, as we are using it today, refers to the use of technology in the context of the school environment. Our members have worked for decades to empower students and educators to maximize educational outcomes by meeting them where they are. These principles fit firmly within that tradition. They also remain true to two institutional guideposts that SIA has held to in over 40 years of experience with the application of technology to information, that they be, as much as possible, technology neutral and context specific. The use of technology by schools is a unique context. These principles are intended both to drive the technology neutral goals of improved educational outcomes for learners, educators, and institutions, while also acknowledging the unique context of in-school deployment. The principles recognize the instances where AI is different and propose guidelines for its deployment in a purpose-driven, transparent, and equitable manner, one that enables tools for personalized and enhanced learning experiences and improved assistive technologies. It's now my pleasure to introduce Senator Mike Rounds, a legislator who is leading in the bipartisan development of sensible artificial intelligence policy on several fronts. Through his work on the Senate Armed Services Committee, he has examined the nexus of cybersecurity, AI, and emerging threats. Working with Senators Schumer, Heinrich, and Young, Senator Rounds has led the convening of the AI Insight Forums, a first-of-its-kind discussion series between technology leaders and Congress. He also co-chairs the Senate AI Caucus, a bipartisan group dedicated to balancing the risks and rewards of artificial intelligence to ensure the competitiveness of the American economy. And he has examined the threads of AI's implications on multiple fronts through his committee work on banking, housing and urban affairs, Indian affairs, veteran affairs, and the Select Committee on Intelligence. Today, we are fortunate to have him share his thoughts with us on AI and education. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Cluck.
The senator's 5 minutes away, so I'm the filler entertainment. Thank you, Chris. I'm Sarah Clark. I'm the VP of Education and Children's Policy at SIA. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules. We're so pleased about having so many people here. I know that AI might not be the sexiest topic, but it's really important to talk about right now. I'm very excited to announce the official release of the education technology industry's principles for the future of AI in education. We have them on this nifty chalkboard here. You may not be able to read them, but I'm going to go through them a little bit. AI and its predecessor technologies have been used in education for decades. This isn't a new thing. You may have heard one of the more commonly used descriptors being used as personalized learning. The companies here today will talk a little bit more about specific examples of how AI is being used today in the first panel. Over the past several months, SIA and the members of our AI in Education Steering Committee collaborated to develop a set of principles for the edtech industry on the future of AI in education. This being a policy document with very many thoughtful people involved, there were many, many versions, but we're really proud of where we ended up. The order of these principles is purposeful. Our first principle is that AI technologies should address the needs of learners, educators, and families. Our industry does not want to deploy AI just for the sake of deploying AI. We believe it should be done in a purpose-driven for the community it serves. Our other principles of equal importance to the first, but are not able to stand without the first are, and I think many of you have the handout of the principles, but I'm going to read the bolded parts just because we're so proud of them. AI technologies used in education should account for educational equity, inclusion, and civil rights as key elements of successful learning environments. AI technologies used in education must protect student privacy and data. AI technologies used in education should strive for transparency to enable the school community to effectively understand and engage with AI tools. Companies building AI tools for education should engage with education institutions and stakeholders to explain and demystify the opportunities and risks of new AI technologies. The education industry should work with the greater education community, many of which are here today, so thanks for coming, to identify ways to support AI literacy for students and educators. Today, we are also announcing a dedicated website, edtechprinciples.com, as an information resource for education, technology, and policymaking communities. You'll also find additional case studies from McGraw-Hill and all here on how AI is used in the classroom, with more case studies to come. We'll also highlight the work being done by great organizations and collaborative groups like those you'll hear from today, EdSafe AI, Teach AI, ISTE, Code.org, and more. I want to acknowledge and thank the members of the steering committee who worked tirelessly to craft these principles. All here, Class Dojo, Cengage, D2L, EdWeb, GoGuardian, Innovate EDU, Instructure, Mind Education, McGraw-Hill, and Pearson. And now, do I have to riff for a couple seconds? Let's see, is Senator Rounds here? We now have, I'm pleased to introduce Senator Rounds to a full room. We've been riffing a little bit, so thank you for coming. I'm happy to introduce a South Dakotan. Being a native Minnesotan, I'm always happy to introduce somebody from a neighboring state of which I took many family vacations. We are appreciative of Senator Rounds' leadership on AI, specifically as co-chair of the Senate AI Caucus, working diligently on the AI forums, and the leadership on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Thank you for your time, Senator Rounds.
Thank you. Can I just, mind if I borrow it for a second?
Go ahead.
All right.
The comedy show.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Look, first of all, good morning. You are here at an opportune time. How many of you ever actually used a rotary dial phone? How many of you have never used a rotary dial phone? right. I just remember here a couple years ago, my son John, who is right at 38, we walked into an older facility and and when we got all done with it, we walked in and here sitting on the wall was a rotary dialed phone. And on the rotary dialed phone of interest, he says, "What is that?" We said, "That's a phone." And he says, "How does it work?" You pick this up like that, you hold this up like this, and then you dial a number. What? Okay, that is nothing compared to what we will see as we use this new tool, artificial intelligence. Is it really new? No, it's not. ChatGPT brought it to the forefront because people suddenly with an open architecture could look at it and say, wow, what an opportunity. This is brand new stuff. The reality is that we have been using artificial intelligence as machine learning for a long, long time, for probably 20 years or more, if not longer. Some people say it started in the 1950s. That's back when they thought maybe 5 or 6 computers might be the demand in the world, And today we wear one on our wrist, which has more capacity than what was in the Apollo moonshot. Today, we stand at the precipice of something that's entirely different because today, as more and more people have an opportunity to use this new tool, teaching is going to absolutely change to the better, in my opinion. But it's going to change only if it is recognized by teachers as a new tool. If it, for any reason at all, is thought to be the teacher, then we have a real problem. It's always going to take someone to be able to share something with somebody else on a personal level. When we think about teachers, I think the one thing that comes to mind is our first grade teachers, our kindergarten teachers. Anybody here ever have a favorite teacher? I would hope you did. I had several favorite teachers. But I remember one time in a physics class in 9th grade, a general physics, general science class, we started talking about what is a cubic foot of water. So what he did, he made a couple of the boys in the class actually build out of metal a cubic foot that we could then fill with water. It took a little bit over 6 gallons, How much does it weigh? Well, it weighed a lot. But what we found out by that is in practical application, how in the world would AI ever give that to you? But the fact that he had an idea about what would work in that particular situation for a group of young people made a difference. At the same time, I fly. And for a long time, I used the King videos, they called them, which was a way in which to learn what was on the practical applications test for instrument flying and so forth and commercial flying. And it was great because they taught to the test. But what they didn't give you was how to fly an airplane. You had to use that with somebody sitting as an instructor with you to teach you how to do it. That's not going to go away. The challenge for us is how do we use these new tools that are going to be here? They're not going to go away. How do we use these new tools to incorporate and to add value to learning about the same thing we've always learned about, but how you respect one another, how you learn with each other, how you communicate with each other. The new technologies come with them a whole lot of new information. And that new information is something that can be, I think anyway, easier to disseminate to lots of people that in the past maybe couldn't get that information. And that means a whole lot of bright young minds that have an opportunity that might not have had it before. So in the Senate, we're working, Senator Schumer, Senator Young, Senator Heinrich, and myself have agreed that what we're trying to do is to say to the rest of our members, let's try to disseminate as much information from really bright minds that are out there to members in the Senate who aren't ever going to become experts in artificial intelligence, but who might very well be able to provide appropriate policy so that we develop that tool, and at the same time we lay out the guidelines on its use. Transparency, to know where the information is coming from. The ability to know whether or not if you were doing something with it that was wrong before the advent of using this tool, it's still wrong if you're using it. Best example, if something is copyrighted or if something is patented, just because you're using AI and you infringe on it doesn't mean it's okay. It means it's still wrong, and you still gotta admit or show transparency about where that idea came from. And in the Western world, we believe that somebody can own an idea, but they've got to be able to incorporate it and for a period of time. And in doing so, innovations have occurred here. AI is exactly that as well. So for all of you that are out there and you want to look at how we're going to innovate and bring education in and use AI, we're going to use it like a chalkboard. We're going to use it such as an overhead projector, if any of you remember those. Or now, as we have these young people coming in, you know, you got to make them check their phone at the school because otherwise they're on it all the time, but then they're going to use a computer. And when you talk to them and you communicate with them, you send them to a portal where they can get in. And you do the same thing with their folks sometimes. My grandkids still have pieces of paper stuck in their backpack and taking it home. And that way the mom and dad, they sign it and they send it back saying, okay, I've seen it. It's amazing how sometimes when the kids have something funny on it, they try to plagiarize it and sign it that said, yeah, I know he's been messing up in school or whatever. Same thing with AI. If we're going to have something get messed up in AI, we're still going to have problems. We're still going to have people play with it. We're still going to have to regulate it to a degree. But what we don't want to do is to stop you from being able to articulate and to teach in such a fashion that AI is a tool, and it's one that advances it. I never knew what a Socratic method was of teaching, but it's still for real, and it still invites people to be a part of a conversation. AI can do the same thing here if we recognize it for what it is. Let me just finish with this. I'm probably going off on the deep end and I'm going to go over my time. But every time a new thing comes along, whether it was the creation of the chalkboard, whether it was the creation of any type of a tool that was used, think about when books first started coming out and the fact that you would take someone and you would teach them out of a book. There was a question as to whether or not it was the right type of a book, whether or not it had the right information in it, whether or not it had been appropriately reviewed. It was a tool. The book didn't teach you, but it was a tool that you used to teach others with, or to try to give an idea of what the facts were as best we knew them at the time. Those facts have changed. I come from South Dakota. Native American history wasn't really taught when I was growing up. It was something that was kind of on the side. Today, we know that teaching and celebrating Native American history in South Dakota is something that we should celebrate, and that it actually enriches what we teach our kids today about what happened to the buffalo, about what happened at Custer's last stand, Battle of the Little Bighorn, about what happened at Wounded Knee. Those items that maybe weren't involved in that tool of a book to begin with, at least to much degree, have changed. It wasn't perfect then, it's not perfect now. Artificial intelligence in its use is not going to be perfect when you start using it in the classroom. ChatGPT is not perfect now. There will be a fourth and a fifth and a sixth additions to it. But it's not going away. What you're doing here is learning how to make it better and how to incorporate it so that young people are better off and have a better education with the use of it than without it. You've got your hands full. We wish you the best. Look, don't give up on it. Continue it, but I'm just convinced that if we get together and we work on this kind of a project together like this, we really can make a difference. And you know, the folks who show up are the ones that do make a difference, are the ones that get things done. You showed up. That's the first step. It's the folks that didn't show up are the ones that are going to wish that they did as these new technologies are incorporated into the teaching process. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
I'd like to invite our first panel to come up, the folks from the companies. Danny Bounds from my team, Teddy, Joanna, Bridget, John. And then my comedy hour is over. think there's a seat or two up here if anyone wants to sit down in the front row.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you, Senator Rounds, for those amazing remarks. It's really good to hear that the Senate is really working hard on making sure that artificial intelligence is done in the way that really makes a positive impact on students. So I want to welcome you all to the first panel of the day. It is called AI in the Classroom. What is it and how is it made? My name is Danny Bounds. I'm the manager of education policy here at SIA, and I'm so thrilled to have our panelists here today. So thank you all for traveling even across different countries to be here. In order to release these principles related to artificial intelligence in the field of education, SIA, we thought that it was imperative to include ed tech developers as part of the conversation. For this first panel, we invited a couple of people who are experts in the field of education and artificial intelligence. For the convenience of everybody's time, like Sarah said, we have listed each of our panelists' bios in the agenda, and now we're going to introduce each of those panelists, so feel free to read along with your bio. First, we have Teddy Hartman, Senior Director of Privacy and Data Policy from GoGuardian. Yes, there we go. Raise your hand. Take it back to classroom. Raise your hand. Then we have Joanna Smith Griffin. She is the CEO and founder of All Here. We have Bridget Evans, Director of Government Relations from Pearson. And last but not least, we have Jonathan Medin, Vice President of Psychometrics, Research, Learning Sciences, and Innovation from Renaissance Learning. Thank you again for being here. Now, let's start with the first question. And again, like I said, like Sarah said, we're going to hold questions off to the end. Our panelists have agreed to stay afterwards, so feel free to talk to them a little bit afterwards. So to kick things off with the first question, let's just go down the line with each of you and have you answer, what is your product? And how does it relate to artificial intelligence in education? So we'll start here with you, Joanna.
Should it turn?
I think so. Let's test it.
I'll use yours.
There we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna Smith. I'm the CEO of All Here, and All Here is an AI tool that helps schools to address issues of chronic absenteeism using personalized bots. So if you think of it as every family has 24/7 help to proactively answer questions and to help to knock down challenges that stand in the way between them and their child being in school each and every day using their phones, that's where All Here is.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Teddy Hartman on GoGuardian. GoGuardian has two kind of buckets of technologies for schools. One is our safety and productivity suite. So that's at the IT level, admin, content filtering. Schools use it for SIPA compliance. And then we have curriculum and instruction tools, kind of the whole learning loop. Pear Deck is one of our driving ones around instructional delivery and helping teachers to create dynamic lessons.
I don't know. Is that working?
Yep.
All right. It's a red button on these ones, not green. Yep. So Pearson, we're the world's leading learning company, right? We've been around for over 100 years. We work across the P20 space. I think as we've already heard a couple of times today, AI is not new. It's certainly not new for us. We've used it in things like automated scoring for assessments. We've used it in our workforce analytics piece, but I think today what I'll discuss is our generative AI use, which we're very excited about the opportunities that generative AI can provide within learning. And where we're beta testing that is in the higher ed space. So we'll be, I think, a little bit different in terms of sitting on this panel because, you know, I always like to stand out. But so what we're using is really study tools. So really thinking about, I think as Senator Rounds had mentioned, that AI is a tool and generative AI particularly is very good as a productivity tool. So we've integrated it into our existing courseware products as a study tool and are working with students and professors this semester to really understand how they want to use it, what the issues they're seeing are, so that we can continually make this product a lot better.
And much like Bridget, Renaissance Learning has assessment products. We have a number of lines of products. But one of the oldest forms of AI that we've been is like in that computer adjusted test where we're trying to take a look at, tests that take kids out of instruction for 2 or 3 hours don't necessarily serve the long-term goals of getting children all the material that they need to get ahead. So that's one of the areas that we've used it. We also have practice products and instructional products. So for instance, speech AI, we take a look at how children that are learning to read and pronounce things, and we can be a feedback to the teacher. And that's a lot of where I really think, AI is going to head is how do we become that tool to assist the teachers in what they're doing. And it can just be a different viewpoint for a teacher to go, okay, this child's doing well or not, and kind of analyze it across all students so that that teacher's taking a fair look at that child. And then we also have an analysis product, so district administrators can take a look and see how their classes are going generally, how their schools are doing generally. And we'll probably spend more time talking about large language models too, because those other things have been around for quite a while. But it doesn't mean that there's not room to improve those other methods and that we can't use those. To where I think we're really heading is personalized learning. And so much in education, you'll hear the term norm. We're norming this. And my passion's really for the kids that are at the edges of the curve. And so how do we focus in on what those children need and get more insights as to how they're doing to then give the teacher recommendations that they might consider on how to help those children that are struggling?
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Those are great answers. And as you all can see, AI is used in many diverse ways through all the different types of products that they have just talked about today. So my next question is, and Teddy, we'll start with you and just kind of move down back to Joanna. What is artificial intelligence to you, and how you implement that in your work?
Sure. So the big talk of the day is around generative AI, right? And so ChatGPT and how are we using these large language models to create new content? And so one of the things we found at GoGuardian, especially in our curriculum and instruction suite, is that the ability for these large language models to create content with the appropriate guardrails is actually pretty good. So we can give it a question, with the standards backing and say, here's a question, here's the standards, can you replicate this at scale? Right? An individual teacher, that's really hard to do, right? But with these large language models, we can use them as first drafts. And so we found in our assessment platform that teachers are loving it. They want to create an assessment or a formative assessment, a quick little gut check quiz. They can create a few questions. The large language models can replicate those and produce more questions. The teacher then has the option to use them or not. And at scale, teachers are loving it. They don't want to be thinking about those things. I was a teacher for a dozen years, taught high school English in Pico Rivera in LA County area. And I had 125 students come in my classroom every day. Right? There's no way, and a progressive teacher, students first, there's no way I could personalize for 125 kids a day, right? With large language models, with some of these technologies that were here, that's the hope. Right? That's the goal, that we can help teachers do what we've always wanted to do as teachers, and that's meet every student where they are and move them forward. Right? So, we're finding some applications that are really relatively safe to us. They are helping teachers generate content. It's not going directly to students. Teachers are that kind of vehicle for saying, yes, this content makes sense. Let me put that in my slide deck. Let me put that in my pair deck. Right? Or let me put that in my assessment. So, we're finding teachers are really appreciating the kind of automated assistant, if you were, right? Help me generate more content. And so that's one of the ways we're really thinking about generative AI in our products.
Yep. So I think, for us with these study tools, it's really about summarizing, it's about practice. So when you think about the average college student is actually around the age of 26, usually has a full-time job or some sort of job, and likely has a family. So there's not a lot of time in their day to learn. There's also not a lot of time for them to necessarily engage in that higher level order with a professor just because they have other time pressures. So really thinking about how can we make some efficiencies in the courseware that the professor is using to help students scaffold their learning Very similar. I also learned what Socratic, I didn't know what Socratic method was, but Socratic AI and scaffolding are new terms to me. But so really thinking about how can we scaffold an interaction within the courseware for a student to be able to come out of that interaction having a much better understanding of the content. So when you think about it and you're learning chemistry or you're learning biology, there are definitely going to be questions where you run into an issue while you're trying to do your homework or while you're studying for an exam, and you might not have time to really understand thoroughly what that question is. You don't have time to read 30 pages. Essentially, you don't have time to read the whole chapter. So what we've done is we've allowed and integrated into the product a summarizing tool. So it will summarize and create flashcards for you to help you study. So to help you get ready for that exam. It will give you practice questions. So you can go in and say, I'm having an issue with this term, or I'm having an issue with this idea. It will then continually provide questions to get you to that answer. Within our My Learning, our My Labs piece, it takes you through a whole set of content in that Socratic method, because I think one of the issues that we see with generative AI, and I think just generally in life, is that we want the answer and we want it now. That's not helpful to learning. So what we do is we work them through the piece of content through the end, and then hope that not only do they have a better understanding of that issue when they come out of it, but that it's going to produce a better interaction when they get back into the classroom. So really trying to drive just better and more critical thinking skills out of these tools. I think, generative AI, there's a ton of opportunity there, but we also have to weigh the risks as well. And I think that that's one thing that we as companies are thinking about is we're not, to Sarah's point earlier, not doing this just because we can, but we're really thinking about what learning science is and how do we integrate purpose-led design into these AI tools.
Bridget said it very well. I mean, when we sit there and think about AI for the future, what is the value of productive struggle? And if you get to looking even at OpenAI's webpage, they said don't use this under certain ages, right? There's all sorts of things that we have to be watching for. I'm very appreciative of these principles, the Department of Education, the standards that they just put out of human in the loop, and that ability to help teachers, but keep something between the children and just a straight out release of AI that affects them without having someone to read and go through what happens. We've been doing a lot of experiments. I'll jump into the large language models, chat, llama. Most of it is internal at this moment. So we really took the purpose of, and we're organized kind of uniquely in my company where psychometrics, learning sciences, research, and AI are all in the same department. So when we do an experiment, we have all of these different disciplines taking a look at the output. And some of the very first ones that we did, like say with Chat GPT, we'd find that, okay, it does all right, DOK 1 and 2. It can't do DOK 3 and 4. And DOK 4 is basically when a child knows something so well, they can apply it through an analogy to a different discipline. That's not the kind of thing that the current models are able to help us with. So we bring it back and go, okay, well, how can we help our editors produce more content? Because one of our goals at Renaissance is accelerate learning for all. The more content that you have, the more diverse the content can be. The more engaging it can be for children that have different interests. So we've really taken it in areas where we want to take a look and say, okay, if we expanded our collection of items, how could we help our current editorial teams take a look at those and write them and kind of remove the blank page problem, which is when you first start out writing, the first paragraph that your item is going to be based on. How can we do that, but then catch the mistakes that we can produce with the large language models? And I know you've all heard the term hallucination. If you want to see an example afterwards, I can show you the speaker bio that ChatGPT wrote for me. And it could be a really good example. But that's one great thing to do. If you want to understand how AI is working, you can get GPT-3 on your phone. Do it. And I put in, I'm an attorney, I have 4 patents, I'm in ed tech, and I was at Thomson Reuters for 28 years. And it put together a page on me. It knew from Renaissance that I worked in assessment. and it knew that I did practice products. So it was quite effective, but it hallucinated and put my experience with legal and highlighted that in education. And that's just kind of the type of example that can happen. So all of us are concerned about these things in ed tech. In the end, we have to prove efficacy. Meaning, if we don't move kids forward, your product fails. And if you get to a state like Utah, everything has to run through one of the universities there. So you can't fake it, right? So just know as we're out there, our goals are to move education forward. And I think that stands with all of us. And we're gonna be careful in how we do this. And we're thankful for the principles that keep us from pushing ahead of where the devices are and where we should be.
When we think about our use of AI at All Here, I think about it really as what is the problem that we are trying to solve, and how does AI help us to move towards solving that issue in ways that are concrete and actionable, and that complement the strengths of educators who are in the classroom. So some context on me. So prior to me doing this work, I used to teach 6th and 8th grade math. I loved it. What I did not love was feeling like I was teaching from 7 to 4 and then pretty much trying to spend the same amount of time tracking down the parents of my kids who had missed that day of school. And math, like so many topics, it builds, right? And you can have, and you have innovation, but the main thing always has to be the main thing. And the main thing for us is that you cannot teach the absent child. So what that meant when I was an educator was doing the work of calling parents, sending postcards, knocking on doors. Very valuable work, very meaningful work, but very difficult to sustain at the level of scale. And back then, way when we started, I say way back when, but it was 2016, so not that far ago. So back in 2016, that felt a heavy challenge, because back then I think the stat was that 13% of all kids were missing a month or more of school. That's the metric for chronic absence. Now, the number of kids who need that kind of help and support coming out of COVID is much larger than that. So the motivating question behind All Here was actually not rooted in how do we use AI. The driving question for us was, how do we solve this problem at scale in a way that pushes the approaches beyond relying on the sheer will of educators to fix it? And for us, what that meant was, hey, AI is a way to take what happens in the best of these interventions. So the best of what a good home visit looks like, where for that example, 2 people are having a conversation as co-educators around how to best support that child, and then use SMS texting to make it such that that level and that rigor of exchange could happen, whether it was one in the afternoon, on the weekend, or one in the morning. So that was how we got to answer the kind of why AI question. And then I think it also forced us to quickly ask ourselves, to what end? So one of the things that we've done at All Here is invest in research to really be able to prove out what is the impact of introducing an AI-powered tool on student outcomes. And we found through our paths that doing that work was able to increase or reduce chronic absenteeism by a metric of 17%. So for us, it's really how do you think of innovation? Yes, but still keeping the rigor to ensure that you get both and in ways that meaningfully both improve the quality of educational opportunities that kids have access to and the outcomes as well.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I think what we've all kind of just talked about a little bit is responsible use, right? And responsible use goes both ways. So when we think about what we as the industry are going to be required to do, not just required, but what we should and what we strive to attain to do, which is to provide better outcomes for learners, there's also the second part of that conversation, which is how are students using this? And why do they want to use this? Are we teaching them the right ways to use this? So really thinking about that AI literacy piece. And what I can tell you is that what we've heard from students is that they too are also concerned about the cheating piece of it, but that they also love that these tools can be used to brainstorm. So when you think about, I took an ethics class last semester, and I put my thesis into ChatGPT. And it came back, and as the type A person I was, it told me I was wrong, and I said, nope, you're wrong, computer. And I went and rewrote my paper based on the research I did after I got that response from the AI chatbot. And I think that's what we're all trying to do, right? It's not that we think students are going to use these tools and that they're going to, supplant teaching at all, but rather what they're going to do is get those creative juices flowing and really think about how can we interact with technology in a different way, and how can we make sure that we're really honing in on those critical skills that we need as we move through life. So thinking about those very human-centered, critical thinking skills as part of that responsible use piece.
Thanks, Bridget. Joanne, I have to tell you, 6th to 8th grade math, that was not my strong suit back in the day. So I probably needed AI back in the day. That would have helped, like Bridget said. However, on to our next question. We all have heard about AI in the news, as we've talked about today, mostly ChatGPT and the safety, efficacy about it. And so one thing that we also in the ed tech industry want to focus on is, making sure that AI is equitable, that is safe, that data privacy is a key component. And so my question next to you all, and we'll start with Bridget, what does your product do to incorporate safety?
Sure. So it's used in a very closed environment. It's built on, I think, what is very critical, on our own content and our proprietary IP, which is a very big issue when you think about large language models and outputs. So we want to make sure that the end user is having a trusted experience, but also a safe experience. When you think about data collection, we're working with a different population than sort of the rest of the table here. So we have slightly different rules when it comes to data privacy. But we're also making sure that any of the data that we are collecting has been approved by the user. So really laying out for our students, this is what we're collecting and this is why. And for the most part, the reason we're collecting any kind of data is to make the product better. So we're collecting de-identified information. It's not information that can be tied to any specific user, but what it does is it allows us to understand how the interactions with the product are happening and how can we make those pain points no longer pain points. I think when we get into the sort of K-12 spaces, we get into sort of the under 18 spaces and outside of FERPA or within FERPA, we want to make sure that we still need data. Data is very critical. I mean, I think you'll ask any teacher or administrator in the room and they will agree that data is critical. But personalized data, personal information is not necessarily critical. So when we're thinking about bias and fairness, it's important to have de-identified data within our systems in order to mitigate bias and fairness. And so that's how we look at sort of data and privacy and sort of all of those technology pieces. I think the other piece that we sort of get into, particularly in the higher ed space, is around content moderation. So making sure that as users are interacting with these chatbots, that they're having a safe interaction, that if they are saying something that could be detrimental to their health or could be a threat or something along those lines, that we are reacting to that in a positive way and making sure that we're getting help to that user, so that there's that two piece of it is part of the trust and safety piece.
So I'm going to, again, ask for that plug. We do have to have access to data. And as our company goes by, we follow the law to a T. We have an LLM, which is, I'm an attorney. That's a level above me, attorney. And that's all they focus on is privacy. We just became SOC 2 compliance. So that means compliance. Everything that approaches from hosting that data, processing that data, we're all very careful of. The one thing you don't want to do is take away our ability ever to be able to say that our products are efficacious. We have to be able to prove they're efficacious, but if we can't know different groupings of students, we can't prove that a product worked for that group of students. So that's just something to keep on your mind, because I think ed tech came from legal tech. I'd say ed tech follows the law even more closely, and trying to make sure we comply. And quite often we can end up with rules like California has their own and it can get very difficult for us. So anything that can be done to help standardize language across helps us respond as providers of educational material. One of the ways that we handle and ensure privacy and efficacy and making sure we don't handle bias at our company is we 2 years ago started a committee that's called the AIG Committee, and it's Accelerate Innovation by Design. And we have representatives from security, privacy, bias, accessibility, architecture, and algorithmic bias. And any new proposal that comes out that's going to head out, we run in front of that committee, and it's evaluated from all those different standpoints. And we found it actually helps us go more quickly because we can identify any issues up front. And one of the first parts that we did with that when we were setting things out is I don't know if any of you've seen the movie Coded Bias. Joy Balawami, I think, has testified here at Congress. We put every engineer and every product developer through that movie. And our assumption was you can't always identify bias. We all think that it's not a part of our lives, but when you see how she handled the process, that really lightens people's eyes. And then what we did after the movie, we actually brought in the director of the movie to spend an hour answering all the questions that our engineers and product people did. All of these things are just aimed at, yes, we have that goal. We want to accelerate all children. And of course, again, if we can focus on the edges of the curve, meaning we're really focused on products that are efficacious for them, that's where we're really going to make a difference, I think, in the world as a whole, and definitely our students in the U.S.
Some of our best partners are ones where they have like offices of legal counsel who will lean in with us, and as part of their implementations, help to set mutually understood clear guardrails for what should happen in the user flows as children and parents use these tools. So for example, what happens if a student or a parent, because we've seen both, responds to a chatbot indicating threat of harm to self or other? What if that threat comes at 1 a.m? What happens, right? Like, these are the tough questions that as a field we have to be asking ourselves prior to tools, especially ones that allow students and parents to interact with them in those ways going live. And I underscore the point here, like, we've seen them because it probably is the one biggest thing that keeps me up at night is like, it's going to be 3 a.m. and some child is interacting with a bot saying that, hey, I'm having a really tough time. And that bot, you have to know that these are tools. These are not perfect tools. What happens when that bot gets that input? So that's one of the ways that we think about it is, how do we think of, every use case, of course the positive ones, but even the ones that might go off the rails, and design for those edge cases such that there's a procedure that the tool in concert with the client is implementing, whether it's 1 a.m. or on the weekend, to ensure that users are safe, like in the most fundamental way. We also think of safety as using humans in the loop too, insofar as there are certain topics where you want a human, whether it's an educator, social worker, counselor, being able to jump into those conversations in a seamless and in a transparent way. And to the point of transparency as well, it's very important that there is universal clarity and oversight to both the inputs and the outcomes of AI tools, right? Like at any time, theoretically, anyone who is in charge of implementing an AI tool should have an auditable path to exactly what is happening with any level of user at any time.
I don't know how much time we have, but I want to take a quick step back on, the question around how do we ensure privacy and safety efficacy as we're building out education technology. One of the things that we sometimes don't talk about enough is, in order to build really responsible technology, it also matters how you build the tech stack. And at the risk of, really dorking out on the tech stack, most of my day job is actually working with our product teams, our data engineers, our data scientists, and this is kind of the fun thing I get to do, the cherry on top, to come here and talk to you about it. And we worked really hard at GoGuardian to build a fully anonymized data lakehouse. And so our product, our app infrastructure that does house student data is only accessed by our school folks and a support person if they need to help that school figure out why it's not working, right? Clearly the reasons why a company should have access to student data is to support the product and the customer. Everything else, we have worked very hard to build a whole data anonymization pipeline so that our analytics environment, where we can test our models, where we can build new models, where we can test for efficacy and impact, all of that happens in an anonymized way so that we are really clear that we can be bold and we can try things and we can try to build things. But no student data is transferring among any of those. And even with the deployment of LLMs and within our product, so one of our products is a tutoring platform. And in terms of kind of what we're thinking about, we're working on a feature that's kind of in beta at the moment that is going to help tutors understand exactly where that person coming into that session is. Through mastery learning and skills-based approach, right? So as a teacher, 10 kids can have a B in your class for very different reasons, right? So having a B doesn't really mean anything, if we're thinking about how to move students forward. So through what we're building is a student can say, I need help with this concept. Okay, let me ask you some questions to really gauge your understanding of that concept. Now the LLM is kind of locked in on exactly where that student is struggling, and then we can create a tutoring session that actually scaffolds based on the necessary skills leading up to where they're struggling, so the tutor can take a step back, say, okay, great, here's the skills you need to then move that forward. And all of that can happen without us sending any student data to the large language models, right? We built the interface, it sends it to the model pushes, prints back, comes back with, the output that is this tutoring session. And then we feed that to the product so that it connects to that individual student. And that's just something that we've done to ensure that all the things we're building and testing, can really uphold those privacy values that we've stood with, as a company from the outset with all of this new work. And so it's super exciting, and building those concepts. And we can also do it, with the appropriately designed kind of tech foundations, to ensure privacy throughout.
Thank you, Teddy. All right. Well, as we're coming to a close, obviously there's many questions I'd like to ask them, but we have a strict schedule here in the Senate office building. So my last question for you all is, obviously we have past educators, current educators, we have, staffers, policymakers in the room. We even have a superintendent here. So obviously we are all here gathered in the field of education to really do better for students. So I want to ask you all, what is your one hope, and maybe with like a 3-sentence max, maybe, what is your one hope for the future of education and artificial intelligence? You go ahead and start.
You said 3-sentence max in my brain started trying to construct a haiku in my brain. Right. Danger, girl, stop.
I'd be impressed.
I would say that my one big hope is that 10 years down the line, right? Like I remember when calculators came out and it was a thing. It was like, these kids are going to be cheating on these calculators, right? And but we as a system, we as a field had to come together to construct the scaffolds for best use. And it didn't mean the abandonment of the ability to think. It meant that, hey, we have a new tool to figure out its best use for and to make sure that we integrate it into the system where it makes the most sense and how it makes the most sense. So my big hope, sorry, this is already long. My big hope is that when we look down the line and my kids who are 3 and 14 months are coming up into kindergarten and in first grade, they're coming into environments where, one, access to AI is not to AI tools, good ones, because there will be a lot of trash that's just out there, right? That their access to good tools is not unduly impacted by the color of their skin, by their economic background, and that their use of tools is helping to meet them where they are and help them get to their next best place. And for me as a parent, then, to support me working with my school in as seamless a way as possible.
Thank you. Go ahead, Teddy.
I think about myself in the classroom and colleagues who are still in the classroom, and how much I loved teaching, right? Loved it. Did I like grading 125 5-page essays? No, absolutely not. But I love teaching. And so when I think about ed tech and AI in the future, can these tools help continue, maintain, increase that passion for education that, we have had in this country in the past, and we know is waning right now, a teacher burnout and fatigue. And so, if there is a way that these technologies can help, reignite further, wherever stage in the ignition we are, that passion for teaching and learning with humans in rooms and teachers and kids, it's super powerful. And so the extent to which our tools can help with that, increase it, maintain it, I'd be very happy.
Bridget?
Yeah, I think very similar. So it's, can we provide efficiencies that make learning and teaching better? And can we think about learning as not just sitting in a classroom at a desk on a computer or with a book in front of you, but can we think about learning as you walk outside and you learn something new today because you were able to look it up or ask a chatbot something about a question you had or something that just flitted through your mind? So can we think about expanding our definition of learning? And can we think about how learning can become much more tailored to who you are as a person? So can we get kids engaged who are not normally engaged because the content is not something they're interested in? So can we change that content so that it aligns with their interests, which makes them more engaged in the learning process? And then I think finally, with teachers, it's a tool. It's a great tool to use within your classrooms. It's never going to supplant your ability to connect with a student one-on-one, but it can help you be a little bit more efficient in terms of being able to free up your time so you can have more of those interactions.
My wife's a special ed teacher in primary school, and she told me what my number one priority is. If we can respond right in the moment that a child's struggling, we can make a difference. We can change interventions. We can put that child on a different trajectory. So a lot of the areas that we're kind of looking at, what my learning science team is really focused at, is how do we take the assessments that we're giving, mix in everyday practice information to get a more holistic view of who that child is and make recommendations on it? Because we all know that there's some kids that are they have anxiety, so they don't do well on assessment. And if they see their score as one thing, they start to think of themselves as that. But if you take a look at their practice material and blend it in within the right parameters, now that we can start getting a better view of how to help those children. And now we have the processing powers there, the data's there, and I think AI is going to make a huge difference in the future as long as we can keep everything on track and aimed at how do we help the teachers, parents have better insights into that child, and how do we provide what they need at the right moment to further their education.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. If everybody could give the panelists a round of applause. We want to thank you all so much. Y'all can go ahead and take your seats. All right, well, while our panelists are taking their seats, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. We've been talking a lot about ed tech, and so I think it's only proper that we invite somebody from the Office of Ed Tech to come talk to us today. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Christina Ishmael, the Deputy Director of the Office of Education Technology within the Department of Education. Christina is an educator, learner, advocate, and an agent for change. And as a leader of the Office of Ed Tech, she executes the office mission of developing national ed tech policy that enables everywhere, all the time learning and supports digital equity and opportunity. Christina Ishmael has become a respected voice in the world of education and ed tech and is a fierce advocate for equity and access to quality education for all learners. Everyone, please help me welcome Ms. Christina Ishmael.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am a former preschool teacher, and so I would normally wait for you all to say good morning or good afternoon back, but I was recently told that that turns people off, so I won't do that. Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all. It's important to contextualize, I think, the conversations that we are having here. Very, very helpful to hear from Senator Rounds. The bipartisan support for all of this work is critical at this moment. And so since taking office, President Biden and Vice President Harris, as well as the entire administration, have moved with the sense of urgency to seize this tremendous promise and manage the risks posed by AI, which is exactly where we find ourselves. So right now, the Biden-Harris administration is currently developing an executive order that will ensure the federal government is doing everything in its power to advance safe, secure, and trustworthy AI and manage its risks to individuals and society. Some of that looks like, back at the end of July, some voluntary commitments from 7 of the largest companies that are focused on trust, security, and safety. Then you also know that the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House issued their blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights over a year ago now, October of 2022. I was in the room where it happened and got to be a part of those conversations and know that that continues to be a foundation upon which many folks are looking for frameworks and guidance, including ourselves. And so we find ourselves advancing this agenda here at home, but also part of international conversations. I'm a little off kilter. I will tell you that I just returned from Dubai on Friday, where we are also having this conversation. 100,000 people were in attendance of the largest tech and ed tech conference, and they were super keen to hear about what we're doing here in the US. And so it's great that we get to be a part of those conversations and say, here's how we're thinking about it. I've been called an optimist, and I happily wear that, thinking about the opportunities that we have when we are integrating these tools in our classrooms. And so specifically within the Department of Education, we are, again, pushing for that sense of urgency right now, knowing that we have a moment in which we can do things internally, but then also work with our partners like SIIA, like Teach AI, like EdSafe AI Alliance, the folks that are in this room, and know that we can protect our learners as well as our educators in the process. So in May of 2023, so just a few months ago, we actually released the report, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Teaching and Learning, Insights and Recommendations. It's a lengthy 80 pages to read, so if you don't want to read the full 80 pages, there's a 4-page core messages document. It's a little more digestible, but it will highlight the insights that we learned from public listening sessions, as well as a landscape scan and the research from the 70s, from those intelligent tutoring systems that have been in classrooms since then. And the important thing as we put forward our recommendations, there are 7 of them. You've already heard one, emphasizing humans in the loop. We definitely want to make sure that that is number 1, so that humans are involved in the process when we are using any sort of AI technology, whether that is integrated into traditional ed tech or it is an AI-specific platform like you've also heard here. We want to align our AI models to a shared vision for education. We don't want the 21st century to look like past centuries, but how are we actually changing pedagogy and instruction? Are we designing AI using modern learning principles? Going back to the science of learning, I was a part of a conversation just last month where we talked about the science of learning, ed tech, and AI. What happens when we bring all of those folks together? That's a critical conversation, and not everyone is a part of that. So we want to make sure that the Department of Education is represented there, as well as lifting up the voices of educators and leaders. We want to inform and involve educators. It's kind of a given, but at the same time, it's kind of important to make sure that we're saying that. We want to focus research and development on addressing context. I taught in the Midwest, y'all. I taught in Omaha, Nebraska. Most folks don't realize that Omaha Public Schools recognizes 114 languages. I was an EL teacher. The majority of my students did not speak English as their first language. That is different for folks when they're like, wait, Omaha? Wait, what? It's the same size as San Francisco Unified and Boston Public Schools at 54,000 students. Context matters. We know that the context of Omaha Public Schools is not the same as Boston or as San Francisco Unified. So it's important that we're addressing that as well. And then, of course, finally, the developing of education-specific guidelines and guardrails. We love that term right now. We want to keep students safe. We want to keep educators safe in this process. We have just started the next phase of our work, which will include a toolkit that is aligned to the recommendations of our report that will be coming out in spring of 2024. Fingers crossed, there is nothing that stops us in that process. We are also going to be working with our developers. So some of the folks of you that are in this room right now may be helping us think through to build on these principles here and think through how we can keep students safe when we are introducing these technologies. Our office is a small and mighty team. There are 5 of us currently. There are 3 of us that are working on AI specifically. I'm joined by Kevin Johnston back there. I would be remiss if I did not tell you that I cannot do this without my team, and we cannot do this without you. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Christina. If we could have the next panelists come up. Aaron, Joseph, and Pat. So one of the things that is so exciting about this convening today is that we're hearing from people that all fit into this puzzle in different ways. We've talked a bit about our principles on the chalkboard over there. Christina talked about the amazing report that the Office of Educational Technology at the Department of Education issued in May this year, and they're doing a lot of really good work to build on that. And today, I'm honored to have these experts in educational policy and technology here to discuss some of the work that they are doing. For those of you who were lucky enough to get one of the copies, we have a little one-pager that outlines some of the initiatives that are underway in the area of ed tech and artificial intelligence. And I think that they're all very complementary in a way. So why don't we turn to our panel? I'm very excited about being able to ask them questions. They are all at the cutting edge of these issues. Starting to my left is Erin Moat, who is the Executive Director and co-founder of Innovate EDU. She's been a leader in technology and education policy and an advisor to the White House. She has spearheaded numerous initiatives and uncommon alliances to advance data interoperability, skills development, expanding access to education, and improving educational outcomes. She is also leading the EdSafe AI Alliance, which is a coalition focused on advancing policy for responsible AI adoption in schools. To her left is Pat Young-Pradet, the Chief Academic Officer for Code.org, a nonprofit dedicated to promoting computer science education. He is an experienced computer scientist and a teacher himself and has extensive experience advancing computer science education and also leading the Teach AI initiative, which we're going to talk about today. Lots of exciting things happening there. And to his left is Joseph South, the Chief Innovation Officer for the International Society for Technology in Education, which we call ISTE. He's a thought leader in ed tech with a focus on evidence-based learning transformation. Among other things, he is the former head of the Office of Educational Technology, Christina's current stomping grounds, and Kevin's as well. Thank you for being here at the Department of Education. He is also on the steering committee for Teach AI. So let's jump in. I want to start with a question for all of you. We've heard a lot about how AI can help to achieve educational objectives. Each of you is deeply involved in this area. What is your organization doing on AI in education? And we'll start with Aaron and move to Pat and then Joseph. Aaron, over to you.
Hi, how y'all doing? Good, we're good. We've been sitting a long time. Do we need a stretch? No? Okay, I'm just gonna push through. Hi, it's really great to be with you. We at EdSafe AI Alliance, an alliance that was actually founded with some of you in the room years ago. So before the consumer breakthrough of ChatGPT, AI has been around in education for a long time, and we're focused on 4 key things. The first is a framework, the SAFE policy framework. That's safety, accountability, and transparency, fairness, and efficacy. All themes that you've already heard today from our industry partners and from folks in the room. We're going to continue to promote the use of the SAFE framework globally. And we've had a lot of success building on Christina's comments. The global technology community wants to do this differently. And the Europeans, the Australians, the Americans were coming together to really think about how do we create these frameworks that support the natural inclination of our educators to innovate, our young people to explore, but how do they do that with guidelines and guardrails? We're also going to meet the challenges that exist right now. So maybe you heard a couple weeks ago, with the largest school district in the country, we launched the first of what will be 12 policy labs across the United States that are taking an open science approach to developing district level policy in their districts. That's rural communities, suburban communities, our tribal communities will be part of this policy lab network. And here's the thing, it's a fundamental shift. This is like the internet. It's not a red state issue. It's not a blue state issue. It's not a purple state issue. This is something that we need to come together. That's the third thing we're doing at EdSafe AI. So you heard the term uncommon alliances. I feel like I need that tattoo, to be honest. At Innovate EDU, we take on building these uncommon alliances to tackle challenges of policy, practice, and research. So I'm not going to be able to name everybody who's in the EdSafe AI Alliance, but I will name folks like AFT, the National Council for Learning Disabilities, the State Education Technology Directors Association, and folks like ISTE, who are really coming together to say, what does it look like if we take this on together, complement each other rather than compete, and support the needs of the field right now? And that's the fourth thing we're doing, which is education is a human enterprise. I'm a technologist. No technology is ever going to replace a great teacher. I'm also a mom, so I know that to be true. We're building the capacity of educators in the field, industry leaders, and through a special fellowship called Women in AI, it's important to me personally, we're going to continue to build the human capacity to intersect with this technology. Most of all, the work we're doing is to take on together what it means for AI to be a tool in education that can transform the work to put students at the center of our design. Pat, I know you're doing amazing work.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Press this button. Hey, y'all. My name is Pat Young-Bradett. 2 things about me. I taught for 13 years special education, science, and computer science in middle school and high school. And now I am at Code.org as the Chief Academic Officer. I've been there 10 years. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary. And I mentioned that because everything that I'm doing with Teach AI, which is what I'm going to focus on today, comes from a teacher lens. And one of the key things that we do at Teach AI is translate policy into practice. And so Teach AI is an initiative, not an org. So here I am, Chief Academic Officer of Code.org, but then we have Joseph South representing ISTE on the steering committee. We also have ETS, the World Economic Forum, and Khan Academy as well. And that's a steering committee of 5, and then there's an advisory committee of over 60 organizations, many of which are actually in the room here, like Bridget from Pearson and a bunch of other people, Keith from COSIN over there, and some other folks as well. And we do 4 things at Teach AI. There's policy work, so we just released an AI Guidance for Schools toolkit, which again is not about it does have principles in it. And actually there's 7, like the OET 7 principles, the SIIA 7 principles, like the magic number 7. 7's a good number. But yeah, there's 7 principles, but also it goes beyond that and provides actual like templates and actual like concrete guidance and examples and samples for districts to actually create policies to support teachers. Then there's a state level AI policy playbook that we're going to be creating as well. There's an AI literacy framework. There are curriculum and assessment exemplars that we're going to be releasing and highlighting. And specific to computer science, we're going to be providing guidance on the future of CS education in an age of AI. Because if these tools can write code, what does that mean for like computer science education, right? So, like I said again, Teach AI is dedicated to translating policy into practice. And, with all those groups, we hope to make that happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Joseph.
So, ISTE has recently merged with ASCD, which is the oldest research-based curriculum organization in the country. And together we convene about 100,000 educators and education leaders. About 5 years ago, we were having a conversation with General Motors, and they were saying, you know how we talk about STEM shortages? And we do have a shortage of engineers. Well, guess what? We need AI engineers to build our next generation of cars. So if you think we're having trouble with mechanical engineers, there's not even a hint of a pipeline of AI engineers. And so we partnered with them to prepare educators to prepare the next generation of AI designers. We've been running this program for 5 years. We've trained thousands of educators in every state and territory in the US and 20 different countries to start putting students in a position of empowerment when it comes to AI. That is exciting work. We used to beg people to take our course. Last time we ran it, we had 1,000 educator waiting list to get in. That's how much it's changed. So one thing that we do is we do prepare teachers to prepare the next generation of AI designers. A second thing that we do is we try to get out a little bit ahead of what's going on. And so we have developed our own large language model. We call it Stretch AI. It's designed to help teachers improve their craft. It's still in a prototype stage, but there is a lot of focus on increasing the productivity of educators, which is wonderful because educators need that. We are focused on helping them improve their actual craft as teachers, in addition to that. And we're doing it through a specialized large language model. It's called a walled garden language model, which allows us to have a lot more control and a lot more curation over what they're exposed to. And this is something that's going to expand in the future. We're going to see many, many more built for purpose large language models. Third, we're providing a lot of free support. We have openly licensed hands-on project guides for educators. We feel like everyone needs to be a part of this conversation and have a way in. We're also supporting districts as they put together their AI plans. And then last, we're working with edtech providers, solution providers, through a network that we have to explore the issues of ethical AI development and to make sure that their products align with these wonderful new principles from SIIA and other frameworks so that they're doing good with the work that they're doing. I think I really appreciated Erin's comment about this being as big of a moment as the internet. I think for a long time it was hard to get the message across that AI is already here. It's not going anywhere. And every future job will work with AI or will design AI. So either you're going to be designing AI or you're going to be working alongside AI. It's going to be part of your work. I tested this theory. I looked up garbage collection. Guess what? They're using AI in garbage collection. They're using it to predict waste. And then I went to the other end of the spectrum and I looked up surgery because I'm like, that's not really a place where I want a robot doing the work. Guess what? In repairing an intestine, robots outperform human surgeons with no human intervention. This is not a surgeon with a robot. an independent AI-driven robot outperforms a surgeon. That's the world we are headed into, and we have to prepare our students for that. And holding AI out of the classroom is not the way to do it.
Great, thank you. Thank you, all of you. So there's many themes, but two themes that came out are how we need to prepare our students for the future, which is now, actually. And also how we can get AI into the classroom to help us improve educational outcomes, to help teachers reduce the burden, and so on. Pat, if I could turn to you, how would you characterize the current state of AI adoption in schools in the United States?
Super low. So there was a recent survey that came out from the National Parents Union, I think just last week or earlier this week. And it had said that only 18% of parents even had an understanding of AI. And then 47% of them believe that schools aren't doing enough to prepare their students for the future per AI, whether that's the teachers teaching with AI, whether in a math class or a social studies class, or teaching about AI, kind of like what Joseph was saying, whether designing or using it, and that their schools aren't doing enough of it at all. So that's from the parents' view. And then from the teachers themselves, they're saying, there's an EdWeek survey, 87% of educators, not just teachers, but administrators are saying that they've never had any PD, professional development, around AI. Now that was from the summer. Hopefully that's different. If I were to predict it, it maybe be 75% now. Either way, it's super low. Lots of teachers, as we know, I think someone's already said it before, teachers are super busy. I think it was Joanna. Teachers are super busy. As a former teacher, we have other fires to put out. We're looking, while AI can do a lot for us, and we probably believe that. I think teacher sentiment is that it's probably mostly a positive thing. Teachers just don't have the time or capacity, and that's why there are groups like EdSafe AI and Innovate EDU and ISTE and Pearson and COSIN and all these groups trying to get in on this AI thing very early to kind of support the field and support educators right from the beginning.
Thank you. Aaron, wondered if you could build on that. What do you see as the greatest impediments to actually realizing the potential for AI during this fundamental shift in the classroom?
So I'm going to talk. Joanna, you're right. This button is human error. It's okay. I have a cheerleader voice. I can dig deep. So first, we need to make sure that our teachers know what the clear rules of the road are. I really appreciated John's comments about what acceptable use policies right now for many of these tools look like and what our current privacy infrastructure says, that young people who are under the age of 13 should not be using these tools. Those between the ages of 13 and 18 need to have parental consent. And yet we don't have the structures right now to make sure that that's happening. That's a big issue. So we need to build trust. That comes with engagement, not just training our teachers and training our administrators, but speaking to our families, speaking to our young people, speaking to our communities around transparency. I love, and I want a cookie for this after, that the SIIA principles actually lead with communities, families, and teachers at the center of the work. It says that that's the first principle from an ed tech centered organization. What a breath of fresh air. And what that tells me is that we know that transparency, understanding what sources and uses are really important. But we have to be clear about what the rules are right now and what the table stakes are right now. We have to protect young people's privacy. We cannot have education tools regulated the same way as consumer tools. We need to protect students' personally identifiable information. You can't put a student roster to come up with cute forest names if you're a kindergarten teacher to be able to have a cute name tag on the first day of school. Our teachers need to know what those rules are. It's our job to help them understand that. And then most importantly, we need to be really focused on understanding that there is bias in our education system. There is bias in every system. And if we aren't clear about what we're doing to design with awareness towards that bias, designed to mitigate that bias, and designed with a framework that allows for those guidelines and guardrails to exist. I think it's the safe framework, but also allow innovation to happen. Safety, accountability, fairness, and efficacy. I want you to ask yourself, under what conditions could I use AI to be safe, accountable, transparent, fair, and efficacious? If we ask ourselves those questions with young people at the center, then I think we can remove any barrier. I'm also an optimist, so I should also clearly state that.
No, I love everything you said. I think looking at education as its own unique space is very important. It's too easy to lump education in with so many other categories that we're looking at in terms of AI and trying to assess the risks and accelerate the benefits in a responsible way. But there are so many things that are unique to education.
Absolutely.
And I just echo everything you said. Joseph, I wonder if you could dig in a little bit more about, you're talking about how AI can actually help to advance the teaching craft. And, how do we get there from where we are right now? Pat spoke to how the level of adoption is fairly low and the level of understanding is low too. So there's a great potential out there, but we have a ways to go.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, we've got to understand the technology. And it's amazing. I was at an AI retreat with actually a lot of industry leaders, and we talked about AI, and then finally we had like a 20-minute session where they got hands-on with it, and they're like, oh, now I get it. And it's amazing because your overestimation and your underestimation is out here until you start to use it, and then it goes like this. And immediately you can see the possibilities and you can see the risks. So I know it sounds simple, but the number one thing we need to do is give people a chance, educators a chance, and then education leaders to experience this technology firsthand. Second, we need to help them incorporate it in a way that actually makes their lives easier, not harder. I always say that there's two kinds of products. There's products that make teachers' lives easier, and there's products that we think they should use because it will make their lives better. And they always use the easier one and never the ones that we think they should use because it makes their lives better. So if we can't cross over these two, make their lives easier and better, then we're not going to get their attention. And that leads to a philosophy of integrating these new technologies into current teaching practice. So just like when it comes to computational thinking, which used to be down the hallway at the computer lab, it's now part of the teaching of civics and history and art. You can bring AI into the curriculum. You can fold it in. So it becomes part of what is being done. And I'm on the advisory committee for AI4K12.org. It's coming out of Carnegie Mellon and MIT and other organizations. They've actually created a curriculum framework from kindergarten through high school of how you can introduce AI concepts across the curriculum in every grade and every level. So we can get there, but we have to attend to this. And we have to prioritize it, not above the other things that we're doing, but in concert with the other things we're doing.
Great. Thank you. Pat, so Teach AI last week or maybe the week before issued this AI toolkit. How are you going to use it? Do you have a plan to get out in the field to work with schools, districts, educators, to try to bridge that understanding gap that we have right now?
Yeah, so speaking of that, we're actually going to hear from Superintendent Carvalho after this, and I don't want to steal any thunder from the superintendent, but they have a task force going on, and he'll make some announcements. But yes, there are districts that we are working with. I think primarily, though, Teach AI works through our partners, and those partners like ISTE or COSIN or CETA, SETDA, AASA, et cetera, the DC acronym soup of ed orgs. I think those orgs are really the ones responsible for reaching out to their constituents and sharing the toolkit and sharing other resources as well. I mean, there's this wonderful one-pager that you all gave everyone of a bunch of resources. And in fact, there are a bunch of other resources that aren't even on this piece of paper. And so the idea is that this toolkit, though, does fill a gap in between these high-level principles that make sense to educators, but they don't really know how to action. And so hopefully TeachAI's partners, including like the big partners like Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, can share this work with districts and ministries of education worldwide.
Great. One of the things that's remarkable about what you're all doing is your work is very concrete. So it's not just coming up with ideas, though that's part of it, and working on policy is a big part of it, but it's actually getting down to the users and trying out things in the field. Aaron, you talked a little bit about policy labs, and you launched, I believe it was earlier this month, the first AI policy lab with the New York City schools. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the policy labs are envisioned, how the New York City one may work, what sort of things you're going to test there?
Yeah, so here's the thing. People have to see themselves in policy. They have to be able to experience tools. They have to understand that their context matters. In New York, there's a set of regulatory and privacy laws that are unique to the state of New York. There are unique laws in the state of California. There are unique laws all over the country in our privacy spectrum, if you will. That's my generous word for it. This patchwork of laws means that you have to, as an administrator, navigate a federal set of laws and regulations, a state set of laws and regulations, and then maybe even some local rules of the road. And so I love New York City. I'm also from Brooklyn, so that might also make me biased. But one of the things I love is they said, okay, we don't know how to handle AI in our classrooms. And so we're going to do something this spring, which is say we're not yet ready for the large-scale deployment of generative AI in our classrooms. Here's some on-ramps if you want to use it. Here's some places, including a high school in Brooklyn, where kids are running their own policy lab around AI that I love. But they said, we're going to step back. We're going to take a cross-departmental approach, and we're going to commit to open science. We're going to work through, I'm calling it a policy stack, not a tech stack, industry folks, a policy stack of the types of things that they're going to need as a large urban district, the largest in the country, to navigate what is going to be a complex set of regulatory practice and even research challenges. And so we're going to do that with the CIO and the CTO, with the directors of curriculum and instruction, with students, with parents, all at the table in this laboratory approach. Because guess what? We're not going to get it right the first thing out the gate. We're probably going to make a mistake, but being in a place where we can be a lab, where we can understand, where we can iterate, where we can invite conversation, that's the concept of the policy lab. The next district we're going to launch a policy lab with is further ahead than New York. They've been working on AI. They have a dedicated office of AI within their district. And so they have another set of challenges. But here's what's really cool. All 12 of these districts have committed to taking everything they're doing and putting it out in the world in an open science approach. So if you're Central Falls, Rhode Island, and you are the tech director and the high school basketball coach, and sometimes the guy who turns out the lights after the game in the gymnasium, you're going to have a set of resources that you can start with. They can be starter dough, and then you can adapt them to your unique context. But this means we have to bring industry. It means we have to bring practitioners, families together. This challenge requires an uncommon alliance of people working in uncommon ways. That's what I'm most excited about, the policy labs.
Thank you. It sounds very exciting. We are in the Senate, so there's policy at the school and district level, and then there is policy at the federal level and the state level. You're all engaged in policy efforts to some degree. So Joseph, if I can start with you. What guidance do you have for policymakers? What do you think policymakers, Congress, the executive branch, states, legislatures, what should they do to advance the issues that you are most focused on in AI and Ed?
Well, that's not a witty question at all. First of all, I think there was a response to COVID of stepping up in funding for educational technology in schools. We need to not take our foot off that gas. Technology is not like, it didn't come and now like, oh, COVID's over, it's gone now. That is not what happened. It's here to stay. And AI is just the next wave of crucial, fundamental changes to how teaching and learning will happen because of technology. So we need to continue to fund educational technology and the capacity for teachers to use it effectively that we have in the past. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you don't have access to it, then it doesn't matter that it exists. And so the fundamental work that we're doing to make sure that there is access to the internet for every student at school and at home is crucial. Without access, which of course is distributed unevenly, which means that the students who are furthest from opportunity are least likely to access these technologies, is going to put them behind. So we have to keep our eye on access and continue to expand that as well. And then third, I would just really encourage policymakers to engage with educators as they make policy. I think it's so easy to sort of have knee-jerk reactions to new technologies. And John made a crucial point, and I hope you caught it, which is if he doesn't have access to anonymized data, he cannot make his tools better. This incredible engine of innovation, AI, that's changed everything from how you choose your movie to where you drive your car, right? There's no part of your life this hasn't impacted. We're going to leave education out of it if we don't allow companies proper access to the data to improve their products. And we can do it. We just have to do it right.
Great. I'm glad that you raised that last point. It seems one in the community that's got people talk about a lot, but it hasn't really risen to the level of visibility. So it's definitely one to talk about more. Can I ask you about COVID and access? So, there are some who say that during COVID, there was a lot more spending on ed tech, but we didn't solve the access issue. So it wasn't distributed evenly. Are there any lessons learned from that experience that we can apply as we look to potentially fund new technologies in the classroom today?
So I think we could all comment on this.
Great, and please do.
Yeah, so I'll just say, so number one is we thought we had a lot more access than we did. When it came down to it, and you either could or couldn't reach your teacher, we found out that there was a lot more access that needed to be in place. So that's one. Second is if you are using technology to assign homework, then your students need access to technology at home. It's a responsibility that goes beyond the walls of the school. And I think that was a really important lesson. I think third, if you are not involving parents in these policy conversations, then you are not going to get the full support that you need for what you're doing. And I think that was a really important lesson. And then fourth is that the advice is not enough. It's table stakes, but it's not enough. You have to provide educators with abilities and training to use that for effective teaching and learning. Otherwise, you enter a copy and paste mentality. And I had a child who was in the third grade, and he got this code. He was so excited. He was going to come and do math on the computer at home. And because I'm an ed tech guy, I was a very proud father. So I brought him in and we logged him in and we opened up this thing. And it was literally a scanned in paper worksheet. That doesn't do anything for anyone. In fact, it's more expensive than just handing in the worksheet. And so we have to make sure we're using it in innovative ways.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Aaron,
There's
if
smart
either-
people
I,
on this.
I totally agree with Joseph. I just want to add actually some very key policy recommendations at the state and the federal level since we're in the Senate building. Let's talk about Senator Schumer's Safe Innovation Framework, which I think came out in June. The first thing I did when I saw that framework is I did a little Control F to search for the word education. And I was like, how is it that the word education doesn't even show up in this framework? And just like I think Aaron was saying, how there needs to be a special approach to regulating AI when it comes to education. Number one recommendation: let's put education in that framework so that when people think about AI and competitiveness, they think about education and not just the technology itself. So that's number one. Number two, at the state level, these are pretty vanilla policies that I think everyone would agree with. We need AI and education task forces specifically for education. Hawaii is doing that, Illinois is doing that, but other states need to do that. AI needs to be incorporated into at least computer science standards, if not other core academic standards. Number three, there needs to be funding for AI professional development for teachers, and that includes computer science as well, which actually leads into my fourth policy recommendation. Here we are talking about AI, but still a large portion of the student population in the US, especially in small schools, actually still don't have access to just a computer science class. Literally, there's a school right now, 500 students in the high school, and they can't take a computer science class even if they wanted to, 2023. So fourth policy recommendation, CS should be a foundational subject for every student. I'm just asking for one course. Math gets 12 years every day. CS, please just one experience. And then lastly, and this comes into the toolkit, and again, this toolkit was created by folks like COSIN, folks like Digital Promise and other groups as well. But states need to be providing local guidance. They need to help wade through this policy spectrum that Aaron was talking about and just really help folks understand how they can create their own policies.
Thank you, Pat. Aaron, you have the last word.
That's so dangerous. So I'm not going to repeat anything my colleague said. On the EdTech space, I will say that efficacy is the last principle in the SAFE framework. We need efficacy, and to understand the efficacy of all of our EdTech tools, we need to invest in research and development, not just in AI, but across the spectrum. We also need to be engaged in a global conversation. Remember what I said? This is like the internet. The internet doesn't stop at the US. It doesn't stop. In fact, in some places, the internet has banked the unbanked. It's connected the unconnected. It can be a tool for change. We need to be participating in these global conversations. If you hear nothing else I say today, please hear that we need to regulate education as a separate use case than consumer tools. It is a different thing when there are schools and public institutions of trust engaged and communicating to our families, to our parents, to our educators, so on and so forth. The last thing, and if you know me, you know this is my hobby horse, we need to invest in a public infrastructure. I'm a technologist, and so I know what tools our industry partners need in order to red team their product and test their tools. They need access to open, large-scale data sets. Do you know who possesses the largest anonymized, large-scale data sets in the United States, in education? The US government. They can be opened up so our tools can be better, smarter, faster now, and we need to think about what that looks like. We can do that today. We can open up these tools. We can open up these data sets. We can do the work to mitigate the bias that exists in our system, but we have to commit to doing it and doing it together.
Please join me in thanking our panelists. That was an amazing conversation. We could have gone on for hours. Thank you so much. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Alberto Carvalho, who has served as superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District, the nation's second largest school district, since February 2022. He was previously superintendent of the Miami-Dade County Public Schools, where he spent 14 years, and he has led nationwide education policy as a member of the National Assessment Governing Board, a committee member of the National Academics of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and in numerous other positions. Mr. Carvalho, thank you for being with us today.
It's been bothering me all day. All this technology, AI, and the door is open. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. So I actually signed up to come here today because this is a conversation that not only intrigues me, but I believe it has reached the level of existential benefit in the educational space for our students and our teachers. And I believe that we're already late. Particularly school systems across the country are already late. And what that means for somebody like me, and by somebody like me, it's somebody like a lot of the kids that I serve, immigrant, poor, former homeless. Those kids are not only late, they're very late. So instead of speaking about what I thought I was going to speak about, I'm going to react to a little bit of what I heard. And I want to begin by echoing what Pat said, because it was in my mind before you said it, Pat, is that, AI is great. The promise of AI is terrific, but we're not even close to being done with computer science. And let's understand one thing. Artificial intelligence is not magic, it's code. So let's not do this, because when we do this, all the kids that across the country have never had access to computer science, now they'll be mesmerized by a district that wants the latest, greatest thing at the expense of. So from a policy perspective, we need to recognize that and address that. I am one who believes in legislating that which is good and necessary for the good of all students. Yes, we do need computer science as a graduation requirement. We need computer science that is taught in elementary school, in middle school, as well as high school. We need computer science to be seen as a language, first and foremost. The second point that I think resonated deeply with me is one that probably private sector partners, and I always love that, private sector partners. My wife is my partner, I don't pay her. But true partnership requires collaboration. Collaboration. Don't bring me something that's fully cooked and expect me to implement it in my district, because my district is so different from most districts. So we are in the middle right now, and Pat alluded to this as well, of actually trying to make sense not only of all the tools that exist, but actually turning all of these tools into environments. And for me, that is the big shift. I do not want my teachers and students to have access to tools. I want them to be able to navigate a seamless environment that is powered by these tools. Key for me, however, and we are in the middle of this work, and there was an entity was on, sitting right here a little while ago, all here, Joanna. They had the guts to say, I think we know what you want, where you want to go, and we're going to give it a shot. We're going to respond to your request for proposal. But a key element was, don't bring me something that's pre-cooked, that does not allow for adaptability and customization. Bring me something that actually can play in the same sandbox with all of the best-in-class providers that we currently have in our school system. Entities that will bring everything, and I heard it, tutoring programs, reading remediation, acceleration, and numeracy assistance, attendance improvements. If you think there's one entity out there that can do all of that at 100%, high level of efficacy, there's no such thing. However, there's a collection of best-in-class providers for each one of these or more than one of these. So what is wrong to actually bringing these individuals to the same table of conversation and adapting and adopting and building a system, an ecosystem, an environment that is fueled by artificial intelligence? In the end, here's what you could get, particularly now in the aftermath of the pandemic, right? Where, just looking at Los Angeles Unified last year, 50% of the kids were chronically absent. And I heard 3 times that New York City Schools, the largest district in the country, LAUSD is the largest independent district in the country. Think about this, 50% of the kids last year were chronically absent. 70% of them are falling behind, have fallen behind in terms of reading proficiency and math proficiency. A huge percentage of them are dealing with social and emotional stressors and mental health challenges. And a huge percentage of my kids, their parents don't really know how to solve for that. They're too busy, they lack the skill set. Often they are afraid because of their immigration status. How do we answer the question? How do I elevate the potential for that child? And can I use the collective intelligence of all the providers to play in the same sandbox and in an agnostic way use the fuel and the force and the tools of artificial intelligence to bring the best of the best around the child? In the way that the child, picture this, is in the audience of a beautiful symphony without having to understand the inner workings of what happens behind the curtain. Yes, there's a lot of oil, people pulling at ropes, lighting, a lot of technology, but when you're watching it, it's perfect. And guess what? The only tool that can actually get you there is artificial intelligence. It can take a system of 540,000 students and create a school of one for everyone. Personalize and individualize the experience at a level never before seen. And why? We just heard a reference to data. Data. We as school systems possess so much data: attendance data, disciplinary data, health information on the student and the parent, student achievement data, end of year assessment data, interim assessment data. My God, are we data crazy? We have so much data that often we don't know what to do with it, or we under leverage the data we have access to. And the only way to fully leverage the data we have for students is through artificial intelligence. So that's what we're doing right now. Number one, 3 key points. Number one, Pat talked about a task force. We anticipated this. So we put together a task force of educators, of leaders, of parents, of students to decode through the nuances of what policy considerations do we need to contemplate and adopt? What professional development and parent training components do we need to assemble or develop? What regulatory practices do we need to consider for the respectful and reasonable use of these assets? And what digital citizenship policy could we adopt where every single student, every single employee signs, I understand, I know, I believe in it. As a result, I'm going to leverage these tools. We completed that work. At the completion of that work, we opened up our system to generative AI. We were one of the very first districts and the largest districts to say, you know what, if you want to use ChatGPT, go at it. Because here's the key, folks. The issue of equity is still a problem in our country. So when across the country systems turned off their network systems to ChatGPT, for example, guess what? A percentage of the students who had their own devices and their own connectivity, they kept going at it. It were those kids who depended on your network because it was provided by the system and the access and the connectivity, they were shut out. Doesn't that paint a picture of times that we don't necessarily need to revisit? So it's important for us to consider that, think about that, and react to it and adopt policies. And what has emerged is what I believe is a best-in-class series of, as a result of the work of this task force, series of policies, statements, training components for our professionals, policies for our students, but also training components for parents to demystify artificial intelligence. Second point is that let's democratize this. If we're really serious about it, create the circumstances, resource this fundamental belief that every single kid needs access to computer science. You're not going to get to AI management and development as a tool unless you provide the actual knowledge that got you there, and that's computer science. So let's not put the cart before the horse. And that we've done in Los Angeles Unified. What Code.org, and I have to confess I'm a member of the board of Code.org, has done, has brought democracy to this process. But that too is insufficient. Now you can go on the site and download, access everything you need at all levels. But that too is insufficient. We need policies at school boards across the country that actually elevate the need to bring that reality not a year from now, but right now. The last point. What does this mean for somebody like me after listening to the terrific conversations that we engaged in today? Within months, probably around December, we will launch ED. ED is our IAP, Individualized Acceleration Plan, 540,000 EDs. Now I represent everybody, ED for education, ED for Eduardo, Edwina, whatever you want to call it. It's your voice in the box. It's your environmental voice that uses all the information we have on you as a student, all of the tools that address your needs, social emotional support, mental well-being, attendance improvement, even enrollment boosting, knows you, knows your parents, knows what you like because it interacts with you, asks you questions, adds relevance and excitement, but also incentivizes you and rewards you. It nudges you, it reminds you of what you have to do. It tells your mom when you're not in school, it looks at your previous year's attendance and connects you directly to the counselor in your school by scheduling an appointment. Why not? You see, you're never going to be able to do this for 540,000 students if you require a human to actually make every single connection. With that said, you do need humans in the loop all the time. I heard it. AI is not going to be a substitute. It's not going to be a supplant of the teaching power that only a teacher can bring. But at the same time, we cannot fear it so that we exclude it from our reality. Where we are with IAP, with ED, it's built. We actually are in the final throes of data interoperability standards for our district, I think ahead of the nation. We are in the final throes of beta testing. First, adults acting as kids with kid data to ensure that the system is mature and knows how to respond. Now we're going to launch in 4 schools, December, 40,000 students in 100 schools, the most fragile schools in Los Angeles Unified. Within 1 quarter, over 1,000 schools, 540,000 students. The best in class of reading, math, attendance, all of it coming together from different providers that have been forced, coerced, maybe, on how to play well in the same sandbox, utilizing all of the data that we have to actually elevate the achievement of that one child. Just picture that. 540,000 schools of one for everyone in Los Angeles Unified. You don't get there without AI. You don't get there to 24/7, anytime, anywhere, meeting kids where they are without AI. You don't get to a parent academy that actually now knows parents sufficiently to build learning modules on how to have parents better help their own children without AI at the scale that we envision. My last comment will be this. We are indeed in the Senate. If this is that important, then let's resource it. Let's develop national standards. Let's elevate policy requirements at the state level. But let's resource it. Let's put our money where our mouth is. And let's do it in a concerted, coherent way that does not leave the kids who've always been left behind last once again. Thank you very much.
That was extraordinary. Thank you so much, Mr. Carvalho. It's exciting to hear what the Los Angeles Unified School District is doing already on AI and all the plans that are coming this way. And I think, there are a few people out there who could make a better case for the potential to really meet the students where they are, meet many students where they are, and try to advance educational outcomes. This has been an amazing convening today. Thank you all for coming. I think it's very clear. I think we've made a case that education needs to be its own use case. As the superintendent said, true partnership requires collaboration. And it's great to see members of the private sector, government, federal government, school districts, nonprofits, and others talk about all the work that they're doing. On behalf of SIA, thank you very much for coming today. Please visit edtechprinciples.com for more information. We will be continually updating that site with more documents and resources, in addition to the principles that we outlined today, and that's principles, Principles, rather than the folks who lead our schools around the country. So thank you again, and for those of you in the room, please take a lunch on your way out.